there was a stabbing and the person was white, there would be nothing. And you know how I know? There was a machete attack by a white guy. No one on the far right is talking about those. They only care. They literally only care. It's that he's black. It is just racism. I love that it's anti-Muslim extremists in a case that doesn't involve Muslims. This is far-right politics right now. Crime committed by these shades, fine. When it's crimes committed by these shades of skin tones, oh yeah, this is something worth rioting about. Far-right anti-immigration demonstrators stoked by conspiracy theories and AI-generated images, of course, but on social media spilled over into violence in cities. Okay, the United Kingdom woke up on Sunday morning, because how long, when did this start exactly? I guess we'll read about it, but it started with the Southport stabbing, which was a few days ago already. Yeah, it was almost a week ago. It was last Monday. Okay, I'd like to see what some of the social media stuff exactly is. Like what some of the fake news is, what the conspiracy theories are. Police arrested at least 100 people. Riot police wearing helmets and holding riot shields. Yes, that is what riot police does. Groups in Leeds waving Saint. You see, this is the kind of stuff that I really want to be able to film. I know that there's already plenty of footage of it, but like, this is history. Like the waves of far-right violence and far-right political activity that we're seeing right now is history. It's stuff that's going to be in the history books. And I as a journalist, I don't just want to talk about it from the comfort of my home. I want to be there and you know, be among the people who are actually recording it for history, you know? Shouted Muslims off our streets, pairing it with a slur suggesting they were criminal child abusers. I love it when they do this thing of like basically playing hangman. Like there was a thing on the BBC a while ago. I don't remember which artist it was, but it was some musician who used a slur for, I don't even remember, it was a slur for like mentally ill people or something like that. And the BBC was being super cagey about what the word was. And I would read multiple articles and still not know what word they were talking about. And I'm like, I hate it. It doesn't matter in this case, but it's just funny that we can't even, like, in cases like this, we can't even really know what we're talking about. In the city of Hull, rioters threw bottles and smashed a window. Okay, a window. Okay, at a hotel, I think they did more than just smashed a window. Apparently they set the hotel on fire, but we'll read more about that in a bit. What started as targeted anti-immigration demonstrated quickly descended into directionless disorder. A library in Liverpool reopened in education to employment service. Yeah, okay, so they're literally just, this is like unbelievably counterproductive. They're like complaining, among other things, they're like generally complaining about the presence of foreign people into their country, but all the time you hear far-right people complain about how foreigners aren't doing enough to integrate. And then they attack the places that are trying to do the job, the work of integrating them. Like, what the fuck? One police officer in the city was hit in the head. Okay. Some of the protesters did not turn violent. In the southwest city of Bristol, groups shouted, "We want our country back," chanted, "England till I die." Okay. The potential that this is the first of what will likely be a trend in the European continent is genuinely scary. Hey, you know how the Yellow Vest movement was mostly a movement in France? But in the early days of the Yellow Vest movement, when it became super big in France, it also inspired a bunch of similar protests all over the world. Not saying that's going to happen here, but I wouldn't be too surprised if we start to see race riots against immigrants in France, in the Netherlands, maybe in some German cities, inspired by this. Like, it basically, I think racists in Europe are gunning for something to happen so that they can do the same thing. And if in the next few days there's any, like, I don't know, someone stabs a police officer or just like some kind of minor altercation, just anything that's big enough to like spark these kinds of riots, you're going to see similar riots happening in other European countries. And generally, I just think the level of tension in Europe specifically, but all over the world right now, and all over the Western world at the very least, other parts of the world have other issues with far-right movements, but specifically the anti-immigrant movement in Europe and North America. We are basically at a boiling point, and yeah, I've been talking about this for a while, but I'm super worried about it. Yeah, for sure. Okay, the latest demonstration follows a week of I'm assuming people in chat already know about this, but yeah, so follows a week of riots in the country after 3 young girls were killed in a knife attack at a Taylor Swift themed dance party in the town of Southport. At the center of the demonstration was a conspiracy theory spread on social media based on a lie that the perpetrator was Muslim, an asylum seeker, or both. Of course. Less than 3 hours after the attack on the girls, AI-generated images were shared on X by an account called Europe Invasion. Do you think this account has been banned? Of course not, because spreading fake news and triggering massive race riots, not a problem on Twitter, of course. If you would please, it's verified. Hey, they support Palestine. Red triangle. They support Hamas. Out of curiosity, let's see if we can find the specific, okay, AI-generated bullshit. Jesus, like, I don't even know where to start with this kind of... Hey, I think I'm the first person to come up with this, but we should really start to point out how weird right-wingers are. Because this is just bizarre stuff. You know what this looks like? It looks like the... there's another account that I follow that does this. There's a whole thing of insane AI slop. There's a whole thing of AI generated images that are getting engagement from bots on Facebook. And like the images make no sense. They're obviously AI, but the only people who like these images are bots. So it doesn't matter that they make no sense. They're just incredibly bizarre, surreal. Like it's a weird kind of performance art by AI of making the weirdest content possible, basically. That's what this feels like to me. Jesus, this account is posting a lot. I mean, apparently they think police are on their side. I don't even... yeah, because the police are fighting back against the race rioters. So they're on the side of ISIS, even though this has nothing to do with ISIS. Like, I don't... The racism is off the charts. And then you have more weird AI slop of... It would be really funny if the race rioters were actually all dressed like this. That would be actually funny. Look at the middle flag. On this one? Oh yeah, it's... yeah, those are really, really big flags in the background, actually. Okay, so they're also showing stuff happening in Turkey. Out of context. We're definitely not going to be scrolling down all the way to the fake news stuff. This is just honestly bizarre content. I mean, if you've ever wondered... Because I feel like a broken record here. But I talk all the time about how the Nazis... The image that we have now of the Nazis is not how it felt. I don't know because I wasn't alive back then, but thinking, like, when I say Nazi today, that evokes images in your head of like the black trench coat, scary dude with face scars and wearing the red armband and all of that, and kind of like cartoonishly evil person, but that's not the image that people had of the Nazis when the Nazis were rising to power. If you've ever wondered what it was like, what it felt like to see Nazi wait, this is not the right page. To see Nazi propaganda at the time where the Nazis weren't the image that we have of the Nazis today, at the time of when the Nazis were just a political party spreading hate and fear of, in their case, Jews, but also other immigrants. This is what it felt like. This is what it would have looked like. This is just modern Nazism and modern Nazi propaganda and literally looking for reasons to blame immigrants for things. When there's a problem, it's the immigrants every single time. It doesn't matter what the problem is. It doesn't matter what actually happened. It's the immigrants every time. Oh, and they're doing this thing as well, which is like another completely manufactured controversy. I promise you, if you... and people have done this. People have done quizzes where they have a Trump quote and a Hitler quote, and you have to guess which is which, or you have to guess or you get one quote and you have to guess, is it Trump or Hitler? And it's random. Like you literally, unless you literally know the quotes, there is no way of guessing because it's a one-to-one, just identical thing. There's that Joe Rogan clip where Joe Rogan was reacting to an AI translated speech of Hitler.
When we would hear Hitler's speech, I was like, we're going to crush the enemies and kill the Jews. That's all I thought it was.
Where Hitler's speech was translated into English.
Whether you believe that I have been diligent, that I have worked, that I have advocated for you in these years, that I have been decent, I have spent my time in service of my people.
And it just sounded like a political speech by any other populist right-wing person today.
And then you hear what he's actually saying. You're like, oh, this is like a regular politician.
Like there's incredibly little daylight between the Nazis at the time the Nazis were happening and today's far right. And even today's like conservative right is not that far off either. The big difference is neo-Nazis today are further right and more insane than the Nazis at the time where the Nazis were a thing, because the neo-Nazis have conformed to the distorted, cartoonishly evil of the Nazis that we have in hindsight. So the neo-Nazis are even worse than anything else, but the like more radical right and the conservative right and the far right politicians are a one-to-one, like perfectly maps onto Nazi rhetoric in almost every single way. You just have to modernize it and tweak it in slight ways to make it fit, but it's the same thing. We are back to the 1930s. It's insane. It's insane stuff. A TikTok account with no previous content that called for protest near the attack site also amassed 60,000 views. This is a little suspicious. So the nation was only briefly united in mourning for the girls, and then immediately basically descended into chaos. Reporting restrictions had previously prevented the name of the suspect, who was under 18. Restrictions were eventually lifted in order to stop the spread of misinformation after a false name circulated online. So the suspect is Alex Rudakubana, 17, was born in the Welsh capital of Cardiff and have lived for years in a village near Southport itself. The motive behind the stabbings remains unknown. Other online personalities, such as internet influencer Andrew Tate, who remains in Romania as he prepares to stand trial on sex trafficking charges. I love that they just feel the need to specify that. I mean, yeah, you should, but it's kind of hilarious that this should be Andrew Tate's name. It's not just Andrew Tate, it's Andrew Tate, who remains in Romania as he prepares to stand trial on sex trafficking charges. That is his name. This should be how we refer to Andrew Tate until the end of the trial. Said on a video on X that the attacker was an illegal immigrant. Source, I made it the fuck up. Tate, who walked on stage in a recent music festival, got fucking cheered. Fascists are gonna fascist. So what I'm slightly bothered by in this article is this. Based on a lie that the perpetrator was Muslim, an asylum seeker, or both, do we know, not to say that if he's Muslim, then the riots are justified or anything like that, but do we know if this is definitely a lie? The perpetrator was from a Christian family. Well, there you go. Okay, so it's not that he's Muslim. It's not about his religion. It's not about where he was born. The problem is that he's black. That is why they're rioting. And you know what? Obvious. Like, I don't even need to say this. But if there was a stabbing and the person was white, there would be nothing. Literally the day after I did that React video debunking a bunch of the claims by that Dutch far-right activist, politician, influencer person, there was an attack with like a machete attack by a white guy. No one talked about it. Like literally not a peep. Complete silence. And more recently, there was a different attack of a similar thing. White guy gets arrested, attacks police with, I don't remember what the weapon was. No one on the far right is talking about those. They literally only care. And it's not a matter of immigrants, because this kid is not an immigrant. He was born in the UK, and it's not a matter of religion because comes from a Christian family. It's that he's black. It is just racism. They just don't like non-white people. I mean, white guys attacking people with blades is kind of all their history. Yeah, and it's not a problem when white guys do it. They're just gonna go, oh, well, violence happens, that we live in a society. But when it's black guys, it's an attack on Western civilization, and we need to stand up and defend our culture and that kind of garbage. It is just racism. Who are the far-right groups behind the UK riots? I love that it's anti-Muslim extremists in a case that doesn't involve Muslims. It's not anti-Muslim extremists if you're responding to a crime that wasn't committed by a Muslim. You are just racist. You are just a white supremacist. You just don't like non-white people. I want to use. Honestly, I'm gonna make a point of insisting on using the term race riot just because it's gonna trigger white people and like the kinds of white people who are doing the riots. And I don't care. Like it's not like reasonable white people wouldn't be triggered by that. But the kinds of racist people taking part in these riots would only assume that race riots can only be done by black people. And so using the term race riots to point, it's kind of like when there's a terrorist attack. It's this is far right politics right now. Crime committed by these shades, fine. We don't need to talk about them. They're just normal background noise crimes. When it's crimes committed by these shades of skin tones, oh yeah, this is something worth rioting about. This is something worth reposting and blowing up into massive social media movements and whatever. And of course, when it's one of these shades, it's not terrorism. It's like a lone wolf or something. When it's these shades, oh yeah, terrorism. It doesn't even matter what the motivation is. It's terrorism when it's like a shade of brown beyond this line, and it's not terrorism when it's this. This is the literal visualization of right-wing politics today. Because like we said, it's not about immigration. The kid wasn't an immigrant. It's not about religion. The kid wasn't Muslim. It's about skin color. It's about race. They are just racists. And if the kid was one of these shades of white, they wouldn't be rioting right now. This news story would have disappeared from the headlines 3 days after the attack. Or at the very least, it would maybe still be in the press, but the right would not be talking about it. This wouldn't be an issue. And you know how I know? Because when there's a mass shooting by a white kid in the US, it's not an issue after 3 days. The right wing never talks about it. The right wing never talks about mass shootings unless it involves Muslims. Unless it's like the nightclub attack by someone who later, like the attack was later claimed by ISIS, something like that. Those are problems. Or the San Bernardino attack, when it's Muslims, yes, make a big deal. But when there's literally mass shootings on a weekly basis in the UK by white kids, that's not a problem. They don't talk about it unless they're brown. It's insane. And again, if it's a white immigrant, not a problem. It's not about immigration. Stan doesn't understand mass shootings are natural disasters. Yeah, I mean, that's basically how they seem to be treating it. This is the literal visualization of right-wing politics. And it doesn't matter. If it doesn't even matter like what the problem is. Church burns down, electrical fire doesn't matter if it's an electrical fire, blame the immigrants. It's the same thing with DEI. Bridge collapses, DEI. Like, what the fuck? Like, in the case of a bridge collapse, it was like the power went out on a boat, but immediately people started to say DEI. Like, the door blows off the side of a plane because of bad management policies by Boeing coming from the top, but it turns out that the pilot of that plane was a black woman. DEI. It's the fault of DEI. Because, of course, if a pilot is bad at piloting a plane, that makes the door blow off the side of the plane. Logic. Like that's how it works. Famously, if you're bad at flying a plane, the doors start to blow off. That is a normal thing. That's a skill issue from the pilot. I don't even know what to add to this. The entire DEI claim movement of blaming every single problem, every single time you find something wrong, look for a minority, either a woman or a black person or both, and there's your problem. It's the Ford quote that I was talking about the other day. I actually found it. I wasn't able to find it on stream last time, but I found it since then. This is an actual quote by Henry Ford saying, "Whenever there's anything wrong with a country, you'll find the Jews on the job there." This is what they do with the riots. This is what they do with like any claim of DEI. When there's a problem, look for the minorities, and then you can scream DEI. And if you can't find minorities, If it's something like an electrical fire, you don't even need to specify what the cause was. You just post about it and pretend like it's a race issue anyway, like it's an immigration issue anyway. And today, you can make it into, whenever there's anything wrong with a country, you'll find the DEI on the job there. Okay, let's look at some of the specific fascist groups behind the riots. A range of far-right factions and individuals, including neo-Nazi violent soccer fans and anti-Muslim campaigners, have promoted and taken part in the unrest, which has also... to answer the guy at the start of stream who was complaining about the fact that we were calling this far-right, neo-Nazi violent soccer fans. I'm sure these are not far-right, they're just centrists. They're like center-left at best, I'm sure. Which groups are behind the unrest? This is the information that I wanted from this thing. So several far-right groups have been... David Miles, a prominent member of Patriotic Alternative. That's all, like... All fascist groups are named some variant of this. Shared photographs of himself in Southport, according to Hope Not Hate, a Britain-based advocacy group that researches extremist organizations. Other far-right agitators spread information about the protest to social media, including British Movement, a neo-Nazi group. Okay. Image of the protest examined by Hope Not Hate shows some people with Nazi tattoos. Of course. So yeah, fascist groups, Nazi groups, people with Nazi tattoos, English Defense League, fascists as well. Riots have also attracted people linked to soccer violence or hooliganism, which has long overlapped with nationalist movements in Britain. There was for people who speak French, there was a documentary recently published by a French media company called Street Press on Nazi groups, specifically Nazi football fans. And officials noted that not everyone at the demonstration had far-right views. Some might be caught up in the summer madness. What the fuck? Oh yeah, it's just my holiday, you know, like, oh, this is, I went somewhere on holiday and there were demonstrations, so I took part. Some might be people who've got genuine concerns. Yeah, but the concern, like, yes, this is true, but the concerns are caused by fear-mongering. Like, people wouldn't have concerns if it was a white kid who did the attack. And white people do attacks like this all the time. Not specifically this one, but right-wing groups in the US don't have concerns about school shootings. Can you imagine how much how quickly gun violence would have been solved in the US and gun regulations would have been implemented if every school shooting, like if school shootings had been overwhelmingly done by black kids on white kids? The guns would be banned in the US if that was the case, or at least they would be banned for black kids. But because school shootings are done by white kids, it's just, you know, we just live in a society. Things happen. But when it's black people or when it's Muslims or when it's brown people, oh, we need to riot about this. We need to take our country back. So English Defense League, a far-right street movement notorious for violent protest and anti-Islam, anti-immigration stance. I didn't realize they were created so recently. So created in Luton, community where tension had risen after a handful of Islamist extremists chanted abuse at British soldiers returning home from Iraq. I don't know any of the context for this, but I'm sorry, guys. I don't think it's unreasonable to be resentful towards British soldiers for a completely gratuitous war in the Middle East. Like, chanting abuse at IDF soldiers right now is, depending on what kind of abuse you're chanting, of course, but I don't think that's particularly unreasonable, considering what the IDF is doing in Gaza right now. Luton was already associated with Islamist extremism because it was home to a small number of adherents to the Al-Muhajirun, an extremist group implicated in the 2005 London bombings. Of course, Tommy Robinson, central figure of the EDL. Is there anything in here that's really, really, really noteworthy? Okay, according to Matthew Feldman, I don't know why did I have Thomas? Oh, because Tommy Robinson. According to Matthew Feldman, a specialist on right-wing extremism, the group represented a new stage in far-right British politics because, unlike the National Front or the British National Party, it did not contest elections. Yeah, they're brown shirts. The UK is weird. Well, now they have a Reform UK. But the UK is weird in that the Conservative Party, up until recently, there wasn't a party in actual elected politics that was exclusively focused on anti-immigrant rhetoric. So there was like a wing of the Conservative Party that kind of embodied that, but they didn't have there was no UK equivalent of the National Rally or of the of PVV in the Netherlands, or of AFD or stuff like that. It was mostly hooligans in brown shirts on the streets doing this stuff. Whereas in other countries, you have that, back and forth, that playful, like that play between the politicians of far-right parties trying to present the respectable face of racism. Like they're trying to whitewash anti-immigrant sentiment with reasonable seeming arguments. That's the thing. It's like they are just looking for a reasonable rationalization of being against brown people. So it's not about immigration, it's just about racism, but they will look for arguments that make it seem reasonable, and they will look for arguments that can appeal to people who have historically not gravitated towards the far right. So, for example, they'll go like, "Oh, we're against Islam because Islam is against women's rights," or "We're against Islam because we blame Muslims for a bunch of rapes," and that will appeal to some women. Will fall for the fear-mongering and go like, "Oh yeah, that sounds reasonable." But at the end of the day, they don't care about women's rights because they're terrible on women's rights in every other way. They just want to find arguments to justify their racism. And so you have, to get back to my point, you have the interplay between the politicians, the elected officials trying to whitewash racist sentiment into reasonable sounding arguments, and trying to present it as a non-violent movement. We're not extremists. We just want reasonable regulations on immigration. But then you have the brown shirts in the streets, like the EDL, doing the dirty work and actually doing the violence so that the respectable parties don't have to do that violence. Don't forget to like and follow. This was a clip from the weekly Barely Informed live stream. You can catch it every Sunday on the main Barely Informed YouTube channel, and please support us on Patreon. The link for both of those are down below.